So you're struggling to balance building apps with things like family and work and life? Well, I'm here to say you're not alone. In this video, I'll share 5 tips on turning your limited spare time into gold to help you create better apps and keep you focused in the process. Let's go! These are the tips and the strategies that I've learned to overcome those barriers and to really get my best work out there, generate revenue, pay the bills, pay the rent, provide a roof over my kid's head, and still juggle all of my commitments. So let's get stuck straight into it. Tip number 1, take time off. Just the other day, I took time off with my son. We went to the wetlands to look for frogs, actually. It was a reminder, a big reminder that this is exactly why I'm doing indie app development in the first place. This is why I have an app portfolio. I took a day off. I didn't do any work, and I still earned around $400. And during that time, I got a perspective that was outside of sitting in front of a computer or sitting in front of code that I just wouldn't have got otherwise. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's counterintuitive. You're wanting to pump out as much content as you can, as many apps as you can. You want to fix that bug, fix that code, fix that app submission issue, all of the things that you need to be doing, not to mention marketing. That's the dirty word, isn't it? Marketing. All these things that we have to juggle. Which brings me to my next tip, embracing imperfection. I am an absolute perfectionist. I like everything to be perfect. I don't like criticism. I don't like to be judged. I had a hard time separating my app with my ego. So every time I released an app, if I got a bad review, I would take it very, very, very personally. And that would ruin my day. So to combat that, I decided the best way is to make the app perfect, make the product perfect, make the marketing perfect. But do you know what happens? I never released anything. I would spend months and months and months just tinkering and playing around with this feature and playing around with that feature. And it just got to a stage where I was like, I need to release this thing. I've been just going around in circles. By releasing a perfect product and taking that extra few months to develop it, you're actually doing yourself a massive disservice. You're missing out on some of that learning experience that when you release the initial version are no longer striving for perfection, and you're just striving to get it to a state that is usable, functional, not bad. I'm not talking here about releasing bad apps or bad software. I'm talking about stripping it down to its core components and releasing something that probably can be expanded on in the future. But for now, we release a version that ticks the boxes and does what it needs to do. And by reducing that time to release, you're accelerating this feedback loop. Release an app, get feedback, release a feature, get feedback. If that takes 2 months for you to release the app, that's 2 months of the feedback loop that you've just absolutely lost. Release what you've done now, get that feedback loop, do incremental changes, make it better bit by bit by bit, version by version. There's a reason why it's version 1.0. There's a reason why we can iterate and upload new updates. As long as we're not just pumping out bad software and pumping out poor functionality, then release it. Stop sitting on it, release it. Get that feedback loop, get that information, and you might learn something new. You might learn something you never knew or even thought of. Even just sharing it on social media while you're building it. It's so fun and it's so great to get feedback while you're building it because it just makes it a better product. It actually is a lot more fun to look back on social media posts when you can see the progress before it's got to that stage where it's perfect. It's fantastic. You should try it. And let's face it, we do not have the time to make things perfect. If you're like me and you've got kids or you've got a full-time job or you're doing freelance work, whatever it might be, your indie app might not be your full-time commitment. You might have other commitments. And in that case, you just don't have the time to be perfect. You don't have the time or the luxury to make everything perfect. You have to get to good enough to be good enough. Which brings me to the next tip. Focus on one thing at a time. This is the important one. I know for me, if I'm with the kids and I'm trying to work on a day that I'm looking after the kids, I do a poor job looking after the kids and a poor job coding. I end up getting frustrated at my code and end up getting frustrated at the kids. No one's happy. No one's having a good time. I would much rather spend a day with the kids and then a day coding. Everyone's happier. Stop trying to make the next AI, the next GPT, the next whatever. Focus on what you're building now. Make a list of things you want to build in the future. It could be the latest technology. It could be like an idea that's come to you. But just focus on getting what you're building now out, and then you can focus on your next step after that. It brings me to the next tip for juggling work and life and just making sure that everything actually functions so that you can run your indie app business. Maximizing your efforts. Every hour that I put in, so for every hour of input, I want to see multiple hours of output. So if I'm sitting down and I'm learning a new language, I did this in April last year actually. I learned Swift UI. For every hour that I was learning Swift UI, I wasn't only learning Swift UI, I was applying it into basic app ideas. So I did a bit of basic research. What's some little app ideas that I can build while I'm learning? And each time I learnt something new in Swift UI, it was because I was implementing it into an app that I would release onto the App Store. So that time I spent learning a new language, I was learning something new and releasing an app. And the net result of that is I come out with a new skill set and actual physical products that to this day are generating revenue. One's even paying my rent. So I made an app in April last year. It was a simple app, took a day to build with the help of ChatGPT to learn Swift UI. I released it. Now it pays my rent. That one app pays my rent. If I had gone down the path of making a Hello World app or a to-do list, just something simple that I wanted to test how Swift UI worked, I would never have created that app and I would never generate that revenue. Another example, this is relevant to this show here. I record these episodes onto YouTube. I download the subtitles, I put it into ChatGPT to create the newsletter, and then I send out the newsletter based on this episode. And then I clip up this episode onto the social medias and put subtitles on it. So this one episode that I'm recording has multiple outputs. I'm speaking with you now on YouTube. It goes out onto Spotify. It goes out onto Apple Podcasts. It goes onto TikTok, Reels, and also now my newsletter. So it's win, 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 win. And that 1 hour of input turns into multiple hours of output. It's so important to leverage your time and get as much output as you can from every hour that you input. If you're limited on time, you might be working a full-time job, you might be doing freelance work or looking after kids. You just don't have the time to spend countless hours and countless time on all of these little incremental parts of running an app business. So leverage your time. When you're building a component, make sure the component can be used in future apps. Make sure that you can pull, like I've got a paywall, I pull the paywall through, I pull a graph that I've created through. So every time that I'm creating a new app, I'm making components that I can use in future apps. And then also theming or batching apps. So I've got a few AI scanner apps, a insect identifier, fish identifier, and a vegan ingredient identifier. They primarily use similar code bases with some customization and training for ChatGPT and OpenAI API in the background. So I was able to leverage 3 different apps from one development tree. And it brings me to the final tip. And this is the most important tip. Simply put, back yourself. Find out, work out why you're doing this, really get it stuck in your head what your objective is and where you want to take this thing. For me, it's to be independent from a full-time job, so I don't have to do freelance work, so I don't have to work for anyone else. I can take time off with the kids and I can have all of my bills paid for. That's my goal. That's my aim. In the future, I want to own a home. I would like to own a home freehold. We'll get there. That's my trajectory. That's where I want to go. So when times get tough, and let me tell you, times will get tough. There'll be nights where you can't sleep. There'll be nights where you'll be stressing. There'll be nights where you'll be worrying. The fight or flight kicks in so much when you're doing this. I tell you, you feel like you're doing everything wrong. In those early stages of setting up a new app, you feel like you shouldn't be focusing on this app. You should be focusing on a different app, and you can find yourself spreading yourself too thin, or just not having that direction or that focus on what your aim is. And it's important to just back yourself. Be your biggest cheerleader and be your best source of motivation and support. Because a lot of times when time gets tough and when things get hard, people will stop backing you. People start putting seeds of doubt into your mind. And sometimes they might be right, so we shouldn't be discounting that. But at the same time, we need to be objective and we need to think, I know what I'm doing. I'm focusing on this. I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but those mistakes are going to help me in the future. So you need to back yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. To summarize, take time off, focus on one thing at a time, embrace imperfection, maximize your efforts, and back yourself. They're my 5 tips on juggling your work, your life, everything in between with being an indie app developer. If you haven't done so already, subscribe. I would really like to reach 501 subscribers for my birthday in July. We're on track for that. So thanks for that. But subscribe. There's a lot more coming. I've got a few more shows that I'm really excited to sit down and record. And if you have any suggestions or ideas, pop them in the comments and we'll go from there.